Don't for the SNP spokesperson, Pete Wishart, but I'm sure he'll be considerate of others as well.
And thank you ever so much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a real pleasure to open for the Scottish National Party on the day after the day before. I sort of think of this as, I don't know, a constitutional boxing day where we sort of assess the quality of the turkey, maybe see how the hangover's getting on, make sure there's not the odd crown or tiara being left behind and everybody got home with the right ermine robe. And coming to the first thing when it comes to barriers, do we have to do this? Do we have to do this in such an ostentatious way? Our constituents are suffering just now, probably the worst cost of living crisis. Some of those emeralds and rubies that were being described on the BBC yesterday are probably the cost of a local authority budget. So I know it's likely it's going to be the Tribunes of the People that will be presenting the next King's Speech, perhaps keeping with their political pallor. Maybe it could be a bit more beiger, a little bit more in keeping with what this country deserves, particularly when it's going through a tough time. Because I've already got constituents getting in touch with me who were actually quite upset about what they observed and the sheer ostentatiousness of what we observed. But this was a King's Speech. This was a King's Speech. Let's get to the substance of it. This was a King's Speech that was designed to revive their catastrophic fortunes. 20% or more behind in the opinion poll for something like 2 years. This was an opportunity to reacquaint them with the affections of the British public. How did they get on?
Such as they are.
How did they get on? Well, that's sad news for colleagues opposite. Not particularly well. I don't think they want to see the news headlines this morning. Let's have a look at just some of them. A dud, a dead duck, a mischance, a failed opportunity. And that was only the Tory press. There were some real crackers. There was the King's Speech. Colin Firth's one was better. And the one I particularly liked is the description of it being insipid, because that was mine. It was featured in the national newspaper, probably the finest publication that we have in the UK just now. And this was a King's Speech that had to work for them. And they were looking for something to get them out there to the stump, take on, what was it, fight, as the leader of the House said, get them out fighting. They wanted the red meat. It wasn't so much red meat in this King's Speech. It was like last week's beef bourguignon. It wasn't so much a fillet steak. It was awful, both literally and figuratively. And they were looking for all the populist measures to get them out there. What did we get? A smoking ban. I imagine them being several things. This is the biggest congregation of right-wing Tories you'll ever see assembled under this roof and on these green benches. I hardly thought they would end up being standard bearers for progressive liberalism. You know, smoking ban, something that the Liberal Democrats haven't even proposed. Now, I support it. I think it's great. But imagine a lily-livered liberal like me supporting them on a measure. I don't know if that's good news or bad news for them, but I'm certainly thinking it's not the red meat that they're wanting. And there were so many contradictory, confusing things about this King's Speech. They've just styled themselves as the friend of the motorist. They are going to be the scourge of 20 mile per hour neighbourhoods. They are going to get rid of these clean air zones so people will have to breathe exhaust fumes for the next few years. So what are they going to do? They're only going to plan to legislate for self-driving cars. So much for being on the motorist side. They're not going to be any motorists anymore. So that was one thing that particularly intrigued me. Like, I suppose what they could do is be the scourge of 20 mile per hour neighbourhoods with an algorithm. That's the modern Tories for you, Madam Deputy Speaker. But this was a last gasp King's Speech. A bit like that 14-year-old looking for a pack of cigarettes in some future corner shop. This King's Speech confirms practically everything that we know about this Conservative government. It's a legislative programme from a can't-be-bothered government with nothing more to say, just waiting to be put out of its misery. And today's debate is themed breaking down barriers and opportunity. Well, I know the opportunity that the whole of this country wants, and that's the opportunity to kick the chaotic Tories out of power. And the barrier to that is them refusing to give us a general election so that we could achieve that objective. And even just saying, another opportunity that I'm looking for on these benches is an opportunity to get my nation just away from this place. This is a King's speech delivered by a government that we didn't vote for, doing things that we don't approve of and don't want. And wouldn't it be better if my nation was self-governing by the people who live and work in Scotland? But even just saying that, who knows, I might even be labelled an extremist now. Now, there was lots of talk about the red meat that was supposed to be included in all of this, and all this stuff about turfing homeless people out of their shelters on the streets of the UK. But the other one that they were considering was to extend the definition of an extremist to cover people who sought to undermine the integrity of the United Kingdom. Now, that's my political mission. My job here is to ensure that the UK is undermined and that my nation becomes free and independent. I don't know if they're now thinking about extending this definition of extremist to half of the people who currently support Scottish independence in Scotland. So I'm looking forward to seeing that one being brought in, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, of course, there's very few bills in this King's speech that actually apply directly to Scotland. Scotland isn't even mentioned in the King's speech. I'm listening to the pain of my honourable friend from Arfon, who notes that there's nothing mentioned about Wales either. Apparently, we're told in some of the documents that 20 of these bills somehow apply to Scotland, but they barely touch the size of the Scottish experience and the conditions that my constituents are currently living out just now. Where we are looking for practical measures that actually deal with the reality of the situation our constituents are in just now. Things like dealing with the cost of living crisis, helping people through this winter with energy bills which will remain sky high. Nothing is in this bill that does this. It's the Scottish Government, my colleagues in Edinburgh are having to pick this up with the transformative Scottish child payment. The one thing that we have in our gift that we can deliver to the Scottish people is to freeze council tax. And that's exactly what we're doing. Where we are in charge, where we have the responsibility, we will make that difference to the living standards of people in our nation, something that they're not prepared to do. And I'm proud that our government is actually doing that. So these are the opportunities that we will give to bring dignity back, to tackle the real issues that our experiences are going on. And this is it seems like it's the levelling up in education that are leading this debate. There's nothing in this King's speech which either of these things. Thank goodness in education, after listening to that drivel from the Secretary of State, that them and their ideological venture in education has absolutely nothing to do with Scottish education, and we could get on and making sure that we deliver for our children. While the Tories are fascinated and taking on poor degrees in university courses, what we are doing is making sure that young people in Scotland get the destinations that they deserve. Fantastic figures, Madam Deputy Speaker. 95.7% of 22 school leavers in Scotland have now secured that positive destination, either into work, into training or into further education. National 5-pass rate is up from 78.2% in 2019 to 81.6% in 22, our best exam year ever. Higher exam pass rates increased from 71.7% in 2007 to 80.3% in 2022. Thank goodness we do not have the Tories involved in any of our devolved services, because we would end up being subject to the drivel that we heard from. And of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have no tuition fees in Scotland, which means that students from Scotland do not have the crippling sky-high debt that these Tories seek to burden on our young people at the beginning of their lives, and thank goodness for it. Of course, there is one bill that totally applies to Scotland, and that's the bill which seeks to have an annual licence round for North Sea exploration. This perplexes me, as it perplexes so many people in Scotland, because I remember, Madam Deputy Speaker, you were here too during this debate about Scottish independence, and you'll remember them and the Better Together side telling us that Scotland's oil and gas was just about to run out. We were told that we were actually cursed with this stuff, that even having it would seek to impoverish us. But now, what we of course find out is that North Sea oil and gas will liberate us from foreign reserves, reduce bills and give us the energy security this nation needs. What a remarkable resource this is in the North Sea, when it can simultaneously be running out and a curse, but at the same time rescue the UK from its current conditions when it comes to oil and gas. And of course it is all absolute bunkum. Apparently we're going to get to net zero more efficiently by taking more carbon out of the ground, burning it and then releasing it into the atmosphere. No one believes that sort of bunkum science other than the Tories. This government has already watered down the government's climate targets, pushing back the deadline for selling new petrol and diesel cars and the phasing out of gas boilers. By far the best way to improve energy security, cut bills and support workers is through investing into more renewables. Extracting more oil from the North Sea won't help energy security in Britain or reduce bill. Our oil is actually owned by the big companies like Shell and BP, which extract it and sell it into the international markets, which we then buy back at market rates. These new licences will make no difference, and the way to reduce dependence on foreign oil is to reduce dependence on oil. It is as simple as that. And after 14 years, this is really the best the Tories can do. They're now at the stage where they're wanting change from themselves. Yes, we all want change, but the change that we all require and need is to get rid of the Conservatives. At some point in the course of the next year, they will meet their destiny with the British people. I'm supposing and suggesting this isn't going to be good for them. This King's speech has not worked for them. They've probably got one last chance and effort when it comes to the autumn statement, but I don't think anybody suspected or proposing they're going to get out themselves. I don't just want rid of this Conservative government. I don't want Westminster government impacting and affecting decisions that are made in this country. We will get there, Madam Deputy Speaker, first by making sure that they're replaced and then making sure that Scotland has the opportunity to decide its own future. And believe me, when that opportunity comes, Scotland will make its position dead clear and we will be leaving this place for good.
Richard Drax.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.